Let's have a nice cup of TRE in the afternoon with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is John Sanbonmatsu, who's a philosopher and is with us to talk about his new book, The Omnivore's Deception, What We Get Wrong About Meat, Animals and Ourselves. It offers the most powerful case yet for ending our exploitation of animals for food. He says that millions of Americans see themselves as conflicted omnivores, worrying about the ethical and environmental implications of their choice to eat animals. Yet their attempts to justify their choices only obscure the truth of the matter. In John's view, killing and eating animals is unethical, regardless of whether they are free-range or factory-farmed. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is a big kind of, well, I guess you could say controversial subject, although I'm sure for you it's pretty straightforward.
Yes. It's interesting because, as you say, it is seen as controversial by most people who, of course, not vegans or vegetarians. But, I've studied this issue for about 40 years. Oh, my gosh, not 40 years. Well, almost for many years. And it certainly is straightforward in my own mind, because the more I've looked into this system of mass violence against our neighbors, the other animals, the more irrational and indefensible it is. To me, it's just apparent.
Yeah. I think for the most part that the reality is that when a person is eating meat, particularly if they're eating it in a restaurant, meat or fish or whatever, they have no idea where it's come from and the journey that animal has been on to end up on their plate, or how the animal was killed. And again, the reality is they probably don't want to know.
Well, it's true. I mean, but thinking about the fact that although we call ourselves Homo sapiens, man the knower, quote unquote, there are certain things we just don't want to know. If I'm teaching my ethics class, for example, I teach undergraduates moral philosophy, among other things. And I say to the students, would you like to see some videos now about the atrocities that we commit against animals that will bring you so that you can have food on your plate in an hour when you go to lunch? No one raises their hand.
No.
So it's clear we don't want to know. And the thing is, in my experience, people have no conception of the scale of what we're doing or the breadth and depth of the suffering involved. But we're killing about 80 billion land animals every year, mostly mammals and birds, and then up to 2.7 trillion marine animals every single year. It's just unbelievable. And we've essentially turned the whole planet into a prison house and killing field. And what's so bizarre is that none of that is actually necessary. All the science shows that we flourish and, in fact, do better on a plant-based diet. So the question really that I explore in my book is why is this? Why can't we let go of this system? And, it's quite complex and has to do with our cultural attachments.
I'm going to play devil's advocate, if that's okay, and ask you
Please.
Some of the questions that a lot of lifetime meat eaters probably say to themselves in order to justify eating meat. I've heard a lot of people say over the years that we as humans are bred to eat meat because of our teeth and things like that. We are meat eaters by design. What would you say to that?
I mean, that I go into that in my introduction. It's understandable that people would have that kind of first defense, but it's really insupportable. I mean, first of all, even if it was true that we were naturally, we have a natural capacity to do X or Y, it doesn't mean that we ought to do it. Things that are natural are not necessarily good. For example, the bubonic plague was natural, but we wouldn't say it's good. It might be natural, right? It might be natural that humans are aggressive, that we all have aggression. I think that a lot of psychologists would agree that that's part of our characters, but it doesn't mean we should promote aggression in society,
Yeah.
So those arguments from nature they're just not good or convincing arguments. I mean, unlike, say, obligate carnivores like lions, who eat gazelles or whatever, we don't have to do it. We have a choice because we're omnivores, meaning that our bodies can metabolize pretty much anything. We can choose not to eat animals, just as we can decide, by the way, not to eat one another, because in fact we also have the biological equipment to engage in cannibalism, which humans have been doing for thousands of years in different cultures.
Yeah. Another thing that some people say is that we need meat as part of a healthy, balanced diet. And there's certain vitamins or proteins or whatever that you can get in meat that you can't get in plants or meat substitutes. What would you say to that? It doesn't matter what audience I'm talking to. It could be school children. It could be PhDs, full professors. It's almost as though everybody went to dumb school, because it's like it shows this is a very potent ideology, because they're just the same arguments that people make when confronted with merely the possibility of ending this violence and disengaging from it. And, and so that argument that we need meat it's just so ludicrous, because all the studies suggest, virtually every study suggests, that plant-based diets offer radically significant health advantages. Vegans have a lower rate of cancer, diabetes, stroke, so cardiovascular disease, and they even live longer. That's what the latest scientific studies have suggested. So, I've been a vegan for over 30 years, and I'm still standing, and I look about 20 years younger than my peers. Although, honestly, I wouldn't ascribe that to veganism so much as my genes. I got lucky that way. But certainly being a vegan hasn't hurt me. Yeah. So people are attached to these myths, and I go in the book, I go into that, and I really think it's like an existential commitment we have. We don't want to think that the other animals of the earth have any value in themselves, that we're the superior being, and so we act accordingly. Yeah, I think many, many years ago, it was sort of deemed that vegans didn't have the right kind of diet, didn't have enough protein in their diet, and was sort of fading away in the corner. But now we see lots of really successful vegan top athletes, for example, who clearly are getting all the nutrition that they need and have got strong bones and muscles on a vegan diet. And I think that's a really good argument to prove that we don't need meat.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, if you look at Alex Honnold, the free solo rock climber, possibly the greatest climber ever, Djokovic, we might not like Djokovic, but he's the greatest he may arguably the greatest tennis player of all time. Before Alcaraz came along, Venus Williams, who was the world number one tennis champion, vegan. So absolutely, it's certainly possible to thrive on a vegan diet.
Another thing that people have concerns about, and I know this for sure, is getting easier as more and more people are turning to either a plant-based diet or just choosing to eat less meat, is that sometimes it can be difficult to make those choices. If you're a sociable person that likes going out for dinner a lot, if you're eating at home, you decide what you buy and you cook at home. That's a lot easier. But if you like going out for dinner, unless you or your friends are vegan and you're going to vegan restaurants, it can sometimes be difficult to find something nice or sometimes anything at all on the menu that is vegan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, because all of the incentives they run the wrong way, right, in our current society. In other words, we have every incentive not to examine our cruelties to other animals, and we have every incentive to go along with the system. So I just want to point out, though, that there have been vegans for 1,000 years, and vegetarians for thousands of years. Pythagoras, almost 3,000 years ago, the ancient Greek philosopher, actually the first person to call himself a philosopher because it's from the Greek philosophia, meaning a lover of wisdom. Pythagoras was a vegetarian, and the cults that developed in his name over the succeeding centuries were vegetarians. So there's always been plenty to eat, but we have this idea that there just isn't enough out there. But you're right that the way society is structured right now, you go out to eat. Now, that said, I do want to say there's this app that you can get, or a website called happycow.net, and wherever you are on the earth now, there are vegan options and vegan restaurants. It's quite extraordinary. I think even in Antarctica there might be some.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking about it. I think I'm joking about Antarctica. But all the other yeah, I don't know about that. But all the other continents, you can get. There are 4-star vegan places and so on. So. Yeah, so it's increasingly easy to do, and again, there's never been a lack of delicious things to eat on this planet that are not animal in nature.
Well, that's another thing that a lot of people worry about, the idea of, obviously, if you're a vegan for ethical reasons, there's no question, and, people don't think twice about it. But if people are meat eaters and are wanting to eat less meat or wanting to become vegan but are nervous about it for various reasons, one of the reasons I think a lot of people think about is feeling like there is less choice. If they're so used to having meat and 2 veg every day for their dinner, the idea of leaving the meat makes them think, so I'm just going to have a plate of vegetables, and they think of that as being really boring, and where's the flavor coming from, and that kind of thing. It can be really difficult to educate people that you can have really delicious plates of vegan food that isn't just grilled vegetables.
Totally. One thing I mentioned in my book is that the English word meat, for almost 1,000 years of common English usage, referred to any substantial food. And it wasn't just used to describe animal flesh, right? So, a meal of potatoes would be meat. So, there's a stereotype that vegans just eat salad. I mean, I'd jump off a bridge if that was the case. It's ridiculous. I have pizza and pasta and, tacos. And I have everything that, not everything. I don't have a steak, but there's just a wealth of things to eat. And in fact, I'm being honest, when I became a vegan, a whole new world of food possibilities opened up for me. And I eat more different kinds of things now than before I became a vegan. So it's not like you're limiting yourself. I was shocked to learn that there are about 200,000 different edible plant species on this planet. And you and I probably eat at most, maybe, 50 of those, right? We have a monocrop-based economy, agricultural system, right? So most people eat rice and corn and soy or whatever, but there's just a ton of other stuff out there, and those plants can be combined in a limitless number of ways. So there are 4-star vegan chefs, for example, Gautier in Paris now. He is forsworn, meat-based and animal-based French cuisine on ethical grounds, and he's created this Michelin-starred restaurant that is world-renowned. So, and he's just as incredibly inventive. Yeah. So the good news is there's plenty to eat, and you're not going to look back after you've made the transition.
Mm. Another thing that some people might say is, what about the farmers, the farming industry? It's obviously big business for them, and a lot of them, it's been in their family for generations. What happens to them? Suddenly their livelihoods are all over.
Yeah, well, nice. I can't remember the percentages, but 90%, the vast majority of animals, right, are raised in industrialized agriculture conditions. Where the picture we have of the bucolic family farm, where animals are just peacefully grazing, and the farmer knows their names, and then et cetera, is really a myth. There's very little of that left. And but I understand that concern. I would only point out that we have historical experience with systems of injustice that ended up getting dismantled, and people found other forms of livelihood. In Texas, there is a woman named Renee. Oh gosh, I'm going to forget Renee's last name. I'm so sorry. But if you Google "Rowdy Girl Sanctuary," it's quite a story about a cattle ranching family that decided that they had become attached to the cows and they didn't want them to keep going to slaughter, and so they stopped reproducing cows for slaughter, and they have an animal sanctuary, and you can go and actually meet these animals. So there are alternatives to staying on this path. The thing is, I just want to say this is not sustainable. I mean, the animal economy is the single greatest ecological threat to life on Earth. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, literally, it's undermining the conditions of all life. And it just on prudential grounds, in other words, self-interested grounds, we can't maintain this any longer. I mean, that's not the main thrust of my book. The main thrust is that we shouldn't do it. But all the animals on the Earth are dying. We're in a mass species extinction moment. The worst extinctions that we're seeing in 65 million years on this planet, and that's being caused by a variety of forces. Capitalism is right up there too, but it's really the animal economy that is the leading force for extinctions.
Yeah, you talk in the book a lot about the ecological savings that would happen if we shifted to a universal vegan diet. And again, a lot of people say, it's one thing for some people to be doing it, or for people to be having less meat, but the idea of the whole planet becoming vegan, people always say, well, how's that going to work? That's not sustainable. That's what would happen till, people kind of argue that that's just not possible and not going to work for various reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting when we talk about these issues in my classroom, there'll always be students who will say something like, well, we can't do away with animal agriculture because where would we plant? We wouldn't have enough land for the plants, which is an exact opposite. It's an inversion of the truth. The truth is that it's so enormously inefficient to raise animals for slaughter to get their carbohydrates and protein from an animal source, as opposed to directly growing crops. My friend Troy Vittese has written about this, the ecological savings that we would get from a universal plant-based diet. And it would, among other things, it could lead to the overcoming of global warming, because right now most of the Earth's land is being devoted to agriculture, and 75% or more of that is for animal agriculture. If you got rid of animal agriculture, you would be able to reforest, millions of acres of land, which would sequester carbon. Hundreds of gigatons of carbon could be sequestered, which would cool the planet naturally. So I certainly understand the skepticism when we think about what it would mean to be to walk away from the animal economy. But we have, for thousands of years, women had no rights, were not able to vote, even in democracies for centuries. And we overcame that. That isn't to say that women have equality on this planet, because they don't. But the idea of women's rights is something that we now take seriously.
Yeah.
And similarly, we overcame slavery. So structural racism and so forth continues, but at least we don't have legal de jure slavery anymore. So
yeah, I definitely think tradition is a bad argument for anything.
Yes,
just because something's been traditional or happened for hundreds of thousands of years, it doesn't make it okay. We're constantly learning as human beings and changing traditions or dropping traditions or changing our behaviors, which is part of growth, isn't it?
Well, yes, it ought to be. And I think, what I outline in the book is the possibility of a new form of civilization. I mean, really, what would it mean to live on this planet without approaching all of our fellow beings, who, by the way, are beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated beings. They're not the stupid inferiors that we take them to be. What if we were to approach those beings in a different spirit, of one of nonviolence, of compassion and respect? And I think that that is a much more attractive form of human consciousness and social organization than mass violence, brutality, and violence, killing billions of animals every year. So I think I argue that, we stand to gain from this transition, not just in terms of our health outcomes, not just in terms of epidemiological outcomes and environmental outcomes, but spiritually and existentially. We'd be a better species for doing this.
Yeah.
And certainly, other animals would benefit.
I always find it interesting that the real disconnect that a lot of people have between their love for animals as pets, or even animals that, like, being against bullfighting in Spain, for example, which is a very controversial subject here. And there are a lot of people who, have pets, dogs, cats, consider themselves to be really passionate animal lovers, might be rescuing animals. They're totally against bullfighting because it's cruel, things like that. But then they still eat meat. And it's really fascinating seeing that disparity. People definitely have a real disconnection. They'll proudly wear a T-shirt that says, bullfighting is cruel, and then go for lunch and have a steak, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, in writing my book, other people have commented on this, as you call it, the disconnection or contradiction, cognitive dissonance, and so forth. But when I was writing my book, what occurred to me is, and I say this as an ethicist, I can't think of another issue within the moral domain where we would consider opposite behaviors equally acceptable. Like, on the one, imagine someone who said, well, caring for an elderly parent is neither better nor worse than shoving them down the stairs. Or loving your child is the same as cutting the child's throat. Same, But literally, that is how we view the other beings of the earth. I mean, dogs, for example, who supposedly we care for and love and so forth. Well, they're killed in these horrible, brutal ways in Asia for food, and meanwhile they're killed in horrible, brutal ways in our laboratories in Europe, scientific laboratories in Europe and the United States. So no animal is safe from our violence. And in a way, my book is trying to point out this contradiction and to say, look, I mean, especially for people who have become close to other animals, whether dogs or cats or horses or, the human, non-human bonds are really profound. I mean, I know many people who when their beloved cat or dog dies, grieve that loss as though it were
absolutely
absolute right. Yeah. And those people, by the way, are not typically vegans. They just happen to have this connection. But it's just weird that we can't make the leap to caring for pigs and cows and chickens, who, by the way, have been shown scientifically and experientially to be no less sophisticated emotionally or cognitively than our cats and dogs.
So one of the things that people, again, hold on to if they are meat eaters, will hold on to the hope that the animal has been killed ethically, in inverted commas, or without them having to suffer. And one of the things you talk about in the book is you feel that is just not possible. Yeah.
The title of my book, The Omnivore's Deception, is meant to resonate with a famous book published in the United States in 2006 called The Omnivore's Dilemma by the writer Michael Pollan. Now, Pollan didn't invent this idea that we could have our meat and our conscience too, that we could reject factory farming for a so-called good form of animal agriculture and humane and sustainable meat and so forth. He didn't invent it, but that book, which became a runaway bestseller in the U.S. and is still part of the state-mandated curriculum in schools across the United States, it was hugely influential culturally. And so I spent a good deal of time in the book showing why the idea that we can kill animals in a kind, gentle way is just ridiculous. I mean, just on the face of it, it's ridiculous. But on examination, more so. For example, people don't realize that figures like Temple Grandin, who's another popular writer. Temple Grandin is an animal behaviorist who's been the subject of a biopic in Hollywood and so on. And Grandin has devoted her entire life to the project of fooling animals into thinking they're safe so that they will go quietly to their doom in the animal agriculture system. That is what she does for a living. And Grandin, among others, is among other things, is the leading proponent of using gas chambers for animals. So, and this is in the name of humane treatment of animals. And you can't gas any being to death, humans or non-humans, without causing them terror and suffering. And yet that's becoming the norm.
Yeah. Oh, well, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show and busting a lot of common myths out there. And I'm sure there'll be people listening who will have been affected by what you've said and maybe even make some different life choices. We shall see. But if people want to get a copy of your book, it's called The Omnivore's Deception. It's available on our website, tre.radio, and it's by John Sanbonmatsu, who we've been chatting with today. John, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a delight, Hannah. Thank you so much.